Afternoon from wherever you were. We at the Multichoice Talent Factory are fully sponsored Multichoice Group Film Academy, and we call it the Multichoice Talent Factory because that's where we manufacture the best talents ever. And we operate from 4 hubs. We have a hub in Lagos in Nigeria, a hub in Johannesburg, South Africa, a hub in Lusaka, Zambia, and right here where I am, Nairobi. And we are already on our 3rd year of producing very highly competent filmmakers with one key objective: to ignite the Africa creatives. And in this journey of igniting the Africa creatives, and in our generosity at Multichoice Talent Factory and Multichoice as a company, we have come across great talents within, and great talents and experience within our continent and even beyond. And we are so generous that what we find in our continent, we want to share with the rest of the world. I'm talking about Sarah Blecher. Sarah, I met her a little while ago, so I am actually talking now from experience, in that I was looking for a topic to do with safety on set, to do with, when the Me Too culture began, and I thought, who can walk us and guide us on how to do things professionally that our crew and cast are comfortable? Sarah is an award-winning filmmaker and director and a producer. Great films like Othello Burning, Ayanda. The next one, she will correct me on the pronunciation, Dun Ek Anna. She will correct me. You know, we always say if you mispronounce anything, it means there's another language that you speak perfectly. That is just evidence of that. She's the founder of the Sisters in Film. Oh, I've forgotten the full name. Swift South Africa. She's going to tell you more about this, which is actually the organization that brings women filmmakers together. Sisters in Film and Television, SIFTA, South Africa. She is trained, now she's advanced her skills even better, and is trained and certified in training on intimacy on sets, directing with a lot of care in those scenes that have to do in intimacy. And she has now a company called Safe Sets, where she and her business partner, Kate, they do train across Africa and internationally. And I'm proud to say she has trained our students at MTF. Sarah, take it over. Please pronounce that film for us properly, the one I mispronounced, and also Swift. Tell us more about that. Over to you.
Oh, well, thanks, Njoki. That was a beautiful introduction. So thank you for that. So just to pronounce the film, because it is an Afrikaans name, but it's Dis Ek Anna. It's a film I made in South Africa. But yes, I'm very happy to be here today. And what I would like very much is to give you an introduction into intimacy on set. I mean, into intimacy coordination. So intimacy coordination is a really, really new career path that's opened up across the world. I mean, I think it sort of hasn't really been in existence across the world for more than 5 years, and it's extremely new across the continent of Africa. So what I would really like to do is just give an introduction to what intimacy coordination is, what the need for it is, where it came from. And then I really would like to open up to questions, because I know this is something that's very new. And I know that the way that different countries, in particular across the region, deal with intimacy in their productions is incredibly different. But this is something that is a big wave of change that has happened across the world and that is happening across our continent. So I think it's something that is extremely exciting, because rather than restrict what we do as a continent in terms of creatives, it helps open up the possibilities of what we can do in a safe way that takes care of everybody who's involved in the production of intimate scenes. So if I could just share my screen, is that sharing?
Yes.
Can everybody see the screen?
Yes.
So I will just get to it and start. I really would like this to be more of an engagement and more of a conversation than anything. So if people do have questions, if they can just type them up, and then I will leave a lot of time at the end so that we can engage with questions and it can be a little bit more of an open discussion, because I do know that this topic is something that often stimulates a lot of questions and conversations. So I will try and get through the presentation as quickly as possible, but giving you the background and giving you an introduction to what intimacy is. So for me, I just want to talk a little bit about my own journey to intimacy, because, you know, I started off my career, well, I still am, I work as a director. And like many other directors that work in film and TV, I found intimate content incredibly challenging, especially in the beginning of my career. You know, there's all the obvious things of embarrassment and shame and all those issues that you have to deal with. But I also just found that I simply wasn't equipped to manage the emotional cost that the scenes required and the emotional toll that the scenes took on the actors. Particularly working in South Africa, which is where all my experience has been, where we work on tight budgets. And so, you know, you move very quickly from one scene to the next. And with an intimate scene, you are asking actors to give a huge amount of themselves in these scenes. And you don't really have the space and time to give them the proper care that's required. And one of the early scenes I had to direct early in my career was a rape scene. And it was a nightmare for me. I mean, I remember going through the schedule, and when the rape shooting day was coming up, I literally was sick to my stomach because I didn't know how to handle the scene. And then a couple of years ago, I was at the Berlin Film Festival, and I attended a talk which is quite similar to the one I'm giving today, which was an introduction to intimacy and an introduction to intimacy coordination. And for me, it was an absolute game changer. You know, learning about what intimacy coordination is and how it works literally allowed me to think of intimate scenes as part of the movie and as part of what I was required to direct, rather than this terrifying thing that was coming up that I didn't know how to handle. Because you know, intimacy coordination is just like stunt coordination. It's a tool that helps make the shooting of intimate scenes better and safer for everybody involved, and also allows you to engage with the scene in the same way that you deal with all the other scenes as part of the story of the film. So yeah, quite literally, it showed me a whole new way to think about and consider intimate scenes, where the scene was part of the journey of the film. It was about the characters, what was going on with the characters, where were they in their journey in the film, and where were they in their journey in response to each other. It's when you start looking at intimate scenes in this way that you can start to explore the magic of them. It's the same way if you can imagine a stunt scene. You know, if you just think, God, okay, so now in this scene, someone has to die and be burned, and all you're thinking about is how are we going to kill them and burn them. You can't really think of what's the importance of the scene in the film, or what's the importance of the scene in the production. And it's the same way with intimate scenes. It's not about the actors, and it's not about shame, and it's not about embarrassment. It's about telling a story. And how do you choreograph? How do you make the scene that adds to that storytelling? And that also provides, I mean, and this is something that's different between stunts and intimacy coordination, that also provides a safe space where the actor is free to act. And that is when you start finding the magic of intimacy. So first, I just want to talk about what intimacy is and what constitutes an intimate scene, because so essentially, intimacy is any moment of personal contact executed by a performer, and the content can be sexual, such as kissing or simulated sex or masturbation. Can be sexual violence like rape, sexual assault, BDSM, or it can also be non-sexual. So, for example, a scene with a nurse who's bathing somebody and the patient that they're bathing is semi-naked. That is an intimate scene. So it doesn't need to be a sexual scene. It can just be a scene that involves just touch. Or, for example, a scene with a mother picking up a child and holding the child to their breast. If that child is not the child of the mother, that is an intimate scene. Intimacy is also the part of the definition of intimate scenes is a performer appearing nude or semi-nude during a scene. So it's one of those three things. Sorry, I'm not very good at PowerPoint, so please bear with me just in terms of the PowerPoints. And what's an intimacy coordinator? So much like a stunt coordinator, an intimacy coordinator is someone who's trained to come in and help choreograph the scene so it looks real. Because intimate scenes, you know, scenes that have sex in them, or scenes that have two characters engaging in oral sex, obviously this isn't real. This is simulated. Just like a stunt scene is simulated. You know, you don't actually go and punch the person and hurt them. You just make the scene, the actors act to look as though they are punching the person. And it's exactly the same with an intimacy coordinator. So an intimacy coordinator comes in and helps choreograph something that isn't real to make it look real in a way that's very safe for the actors, so that the actors are not suddenly getting touched in an inappropriate way or having the agreements that they've negotiated at the beginning of the production violated. So it's creating a safe space for the actors to be able to do that, to be able to understand what's coming up and to choreograph the action to make it look as real as possible. So in very brief, that's what an intimacy coordinator is. Okay, so why do we all of a sudden need intimacy coordination? Why do we need intimacy coordinators all of a sudden? And I think that really has a lot to do with the way that the world has changed over the last half a decade or decade. And the Me Too movement was really the catalyst that started the idea of intimacy coordinators. And I think part of that was because actors suddenly realized that they have the right to ask for this thing. They have the right to go to work and perform their job, which is acting, in a space that's safe and that allows them to be professional, that allows them to go home to their wife or their husband and not feel like they've cheated on them, or not feel like they've done something that's wrong or something that's bad. So really the beginning of the changes in terms of intimacy coordination happened around the Me Too movement. That's when things really started to change. And directors and writers and performers started realizing, gosh, there's a big hole in what we do. If we want to do a dance scene, we get a choreographer. If we want to do a stunt scene, we get a stunt coordinator. Why can't we do the same with intimate scenes? Why can't we get an intimacy coordinator to help choreograph these scenes? The other thing that really happened, and that this was another big change that happened across the world and is starting to happen across our continent, is that producers have suddenly come to understand that they are liable for what happens on their set. And if they don't provide a safe environment for the performers and for the crew and for the cast on the set, they can be sued. There was a recent case that happened in South Africa in Transnet. It actually wasn't in the film and TV industry, but where a sexual harassment case happened in Transnet, and Transnet was liable just because the harassment happened, in their work environment. And it's the same thing with producers in our industry. If any sexual harassment or sexual violation happens, the actors aren't safe on set, and a safe work environment hasn't been provided for the performers, the producers are liable and can be sued by the actors. And so Me Too was the beginning of the wave and the beginning of the change in consciousness. But this liability issue is the one that has really made the biggest change across the world. And it's led to things like, when you do a Netflix production or when you do an HBO production, HBO won't allow you to do a production with intimate scenes without an intimacy coordinator. And I know that Netflix is moving in the same direction. They insist, just like they insist that if you've got a stunt scene, you've got a stunt coordinator to protect their liability. They insist that you've got an intimacy coordinator to protect their liability and to protect your cast and crew during these intimate scenes. Because very much like, and I know I keep talking about stunt scenes, but very much like stunt scenes, you have a stunt coordinator because they're potentially dangerous to the performers. But that danger you can see. You can see a broken bone, you can see blood, you can see a broken arm. With intimacy, you can't necessarily see the damage that's being caused, but it doesn't mean it isn't being caused. You can't see the effect on somebody of having been sexually harassed or sexually assaulted during a scene, but it doesn't mean it isn't happening, and it doesn't mean that the performer doesn't have the right to have that environment protected. So how were these scenes handled before? I mean, I can just speak from my own experience in terms of this, but very often what used to happen is that, actors were told, you two go off and rehearse the scene or see if you've got some kind of chemistry between the two of you, and then you come back and you perform the scene. Or they were told, why don't you two just go out for a drink and see if something happens, and then you can come back and do the scene. And these things are absolute sexual harassment and sexual assault. When an actor is agreeing to play a role, they're not agreeing to get involved in a relationship with someone else. They're agreeing to play the role of a person in a relationship with someone else, not actually have a big effect on their life in what's actually going on in their own private life. This is the job that they do, that they come to work and they perform, and then they go home to their lives. And that's something that's very, very, very important. So some of the things that actors have reported, I mean, someone reported being the only woman on set and not being given a robe to cover up in a nude scene between takes, which, I mean, you do that, you will be liable for sexual assault of sexual abuse on that actor. Actors have been asked to have real sex instead of simulated sex, which, I mean, that's pornography, right? So in productions, we don't have real sex. In fact, in production, genitals cannot actually touch each other. So we do scenes that make it look as though the actors are engaged in sex, but they absolutely are not engaged in sex. being asked to have actual sex instead of simulated sex is sexual assault and or rape. So yeah, it's not allowed on most sets around the world, obviously. The other thing that actors have reported is having their nude images used in marketing campaigns without their consent. This is absolutely, as you can imagine, a big no-no. And many actors report having experiencing sexual assault right in the middle of a take. So, you know, the actor is lying in bed for a sex scene and suddenly they're being sexually assaulted by the other actor in the middle of a take. So these are the things that were happening before and that have led to the development of intimacy coordinators in an attempt to prevent these things from happening. The reality is that the problem, sorry, not the reality, but the problem comes in when things stop being professional and they start being personal. And for intimacy coordination, that is an incredibly important line. You have to, as a performer and as a production, keep the personal away from the scene in its entirety. So a director should never ask a performer, well, how, you know, just do it like you did it with your boyfriend last night, or like you do it with your husband. That's not what's going on in intimate scenes. What's going on in intimate scenes is trying to find what is the character's sexuality, not what is the actor's sexuality. That should be left at home and should never enter the picture. What an intimacy coordinator works with the actors and the director to do is to say, okay, but what is the sexuality of this character? How would this character behave in this scene and in this moment in this character's life? Not how would you, personal actor, behave in your personal life? And keeping that separation is so important to protecting actors and creating a professional environment. Okay, so how does it work? How does intimacy coordination work? So the idea behind intimacy coordination, and also one of the things that I should mention is that we in South Africa as an industry have developed a set of protocols which have been adopted across the industry. You know, they've been signed on by the Actors Guild, the producers, the IPO, the Producers Association, the Editors Guild, there are a whole lot of organizations that have signed on to the protocols, meaning that the protocols have now become the standard in the industry in South Africa. So the whole idea of those protocols and the whole idea of intimacy coordination is literally to bring a clear structure and process to intimate scenes. So in a way, it's professionalizing intimate scenes by bringing a process and structure. So there's now a new way of doing intimate scenes that's not about just going off and improvising or about making things up as you go along. It's saying, actually, there should be no improvisation in an intimate scene, just like you would never improvise in a stunt scene. I mean, can you imagine in a stunt scene, if it's a big bar fight and the director says, okay, everyone, let's just improvise and see what happens. You're going to land up with a lot of blood and broken things and broken people. It's the same way with an intimate scene. You know, if the director just opens everything up and says, okay, well, everyone just improvise, you're going to land up with a lot of damaged performers and actually a lot of traumatized crew. So it is about protecting the performers, but it's also about protecting the crew. So like stunt scenes, intimate scenes they have to be broken down into bits of action, and the action needs to be choreographed, just like stunt scenes, for the camera. I mean, I know I'm repeating myself a little bit, but it's important to keep in mind that intimate scenes are not real, they're simulated, just like stunt scenes. So the first thing is to have mature, transparent communication, meaning that you don't use titillating, well, actually, I'm going to get to that in a minute, but you don't use titillating language. The other thing is that there should be absolutely no shame involved in intimate scenes. Closed set protocol should be adhered to. There should be a professionalism. The actors are working, and the work that they're doing and what they're bringing to the production should be respected. That's very important. So in terms of open communication, it's really, really, really important in order to take shame and embarrassment out of the scenes, that proper language is used. So you don't use titillating language. You don't use language that's going to, titillate people or make them excited. You use the proper words for things. You use words like penis. You use words like buttocks. You use words like breasts that aren't there to make people more excited, but are there to make the scene as mature as possible, so that the communication is easy and not shameful in any way. And also, if you put everything on the table in the beginning, you make sure that everybody's on the same page. And that also gives the actors a chance to say, you know what, actually, I'm not comfortable with the scene. So I think I'm maybe not the right person to do the scene. And then the production can go and find someone who is comfortable to do the scene. But when you have that open communication, when the director is explaining, this is what the scene will entail, and asking the performer for their consent for the scene, that level of communication needs to keep happening from the beginning of the production. From the day of auditions, it needs to be clear what the role entails, and the performer needs to be given the right to say, yes, I'm happy to do this, I consent, or no, I'm not, and maybe this isn't a role for me. That does become a little bit more complicated when you're working on something like a telenovela or a daily soap or a program like that, where you don't really know what's going to happen to the character and how the character's arc and story is going to develop. But, even in that case, without consent from the performer, forcing the performer to do something that they don't want to do, is sexual harassment in the least case scenario and rape in the worst case scenario. So an actor and a performer has the right to give consent at every stage of production, and has the right to withdraw consent at every stage of production. So even though the actor said, I'm absolutely happy to do full frontal nudity, during a scene, suddenly the actors got their period or feeling whatever, and they don't want to do it, they cannot be forced to take their clothes off. That's sexual assault. So it is important to make sure that there is that open communication, and that the production and the director are constantly talking to the actor, and there's constant check-ins. Are you okay? Do you give consent? So that you don't land up on set with a huge calamity. Because the other thing, and this is something that's happened to me, and when I've been coordinating on set, is an actor freezes up. And an actor can, agree and say, oh, okay, yes, I don't mind doing a same-sex kiss. But on the day when they actually have to do it, their literal body goes into trauma and freezes. And you cannot force that actor to do a kiss when that actor's whole body can't do it. So it is important to keep making sure that that consent is real. And that when the actor says, yes, of course I can, I'm happy and comfortable with same-sex kissing, or I'm happy and comfortable to do simulated oral sex or to do a simulated sex scene, that is what they mean. Gone are the days where that person is forced into a situation where they're doing something they don't want to be doing. Those days are, I think in some productions they're not yet gone, but they're on their way going. And they will go faster and faster as performers start realizing that they literally have the right to sue the production, and that the producers are liable. So it's a good idea for producers to encourage this level of disclosure about what's going to happen right from auditions, and to be clear about what's going to happen. It's in the same way like an actor would never be hired to jump off a building when they can't jump off a building, or to swim or horse ride when they can't swim or horse ride. I mean, you're putting the actor in danger. And it's the exact same way that we should think about intimate scenes. The next part of the process is that the scenes need to be very carefully choreographed. And this is such an important part of the process. So as I said before, intimate scenes are never improvised. You know, you talk to actors and they'll tell you the story about when they have to do a kiss in a scene. And they'll say they have to, you know, they're acting their heart out, but in the back of their mind, they know that the kiss is coming up. They're completely terrified. And so suddenly they realize, oh God, the kiss is coming, and they don't know what's going to happen. And they go into a state of panic, and then they get kissed, and somehow the other actor touches their breasts, and they're like, oh my God, my breast just got touched. And then they realize, oh gosh, I better come back in the scene, and they click back and they get back into acting, and then they pass the kiss, and it's a huge relief. That isn't the way that we do intimate scenes anymore. What we do is we choreograph every single action and we break down consent. So before we do a scene, the actors give each other consent. Are you happy if I touch you on your breast? The other actor will say, I'm actually not happy. You can touch me just above my breast. Sometimes the actors will say things like, you know, I'm so comfortable if you touch me anywhere in my body, but I'm not comfortable if you touch me on my neck. Like if you touch my neck, I feel like I'm going to throw up. And then the other actor knows, okay, this is where this person has not given me consent. And when you choreograph each part of the scene and each bit of touch and each bit of action, and the actors have given consent for that, it frees both actors, because the actor who's given consent understands that, you know, they're not all of a sudden going to be shocked with their breasts touched in the middle of a kiss. They know that's what's going to happen, and they've given consent. They're okay with that. And for the actor who's receiving consent, you also don't feel like, oh my God, my hand just brushed past someone's penis and I touched it by mistake. You know, you give consent and you agree and you choreograph the action very, very, very much in the same way that you do a dance. So everybody knows every position, every move, how we're going to get from here to here, how we're going to get onto the bed, how am I going to get on top of you? And those actions are choreographed, separated from the emotion of the scene. And then the emotion of the scene is worked out with the director. And then those two things, the actions and the emotion, are married together. And then there's the performance. And what this does is take away anything that's possibly unexpected, and also give the actors space to act. You know, if they know what's coming, they can stay in character and they can stay in the scene. And as an intimacy coordinator, when you choreograph that scene, what you do is you try and put the director's vision into play. I mean, into practice. You try and actualize the director's vision. So the director says, in this scene, I want a very tender, passionate lovemaking. So when you choreograph the scene, you do it in a way that the actions are gentle and passionate. If you want a scene that's rough and lustful, you choreograph a rough and lustful scene, working together with the sexuality of the characters that you've developed with the actors. It's back to the thing, character story, and that's what is important. So there are some rules on choreographing scenes. The one is you always have a third party present. So you never say to actors, go into another room and rehearse the scene and work it out by yourselves. That takes it back into the realm of the personal and away from the realm of the professional. So there must always be a third person present. You discuss and you sit and you work out the scene, as I keep saying, to serve the story and to work within the space that you're choreographing the actions around. As I've described, you agree physical touch between the performers before you start the scene. So everybody knows where each other's boundaries are, what each other is okay with, and what each other is giving consent to. That is incredibly important. And then you block the scene. You agree this beat, the actors will be on the bed, then the actors will roll over, then the actors will sit up, whatever the beats of the scene are. you do that choreographing the scene to camera. And this to any filmmaker will make absolute sense. It's, you know, when you do a big dance sequence in a film, the dance sequence is choreographed for the camera. When you do a stunt sequence, the stunt sequence is choreographed for the camera. It's the same with an intimate scene. You know, if depending on where the camera is going to be, that's how you block and choreograph the actors. Okay, so kissing in terms of intimacy is interesting because kissing is the only thing that is actually real. You know, everything else, so like, whereas kissing would seem like the mildest thing, kissing is not the mildest thing because it's actually the only thing where you actually are really physically kissing. You know, simulated sex is simulated, simulated oral sex is simulated, orgies, or everything is simulated, but kissing is real. So the first thing to consider in the kiss is it's the same thing. What is going on in the story? What is going on between these two characters? Is she receiving the kiss from him? Is he forcing himself upon her and kissing her? And is she just taking the kiss because she doesn't know what else to do? What is the quality of that kiss? That needs to be agreed right up front. And just like with everything, there are rules with kissing. So first rule is absolutely no tongues. That's standard practice. If the director says, okay, well, this is the scene that we really do need tongues in, then again, you go back to the actors, do the actors consent? If they consent, fine. If they don't, you can't kiss with tongues. Kissing should never, ever, ever be rehearsed in private. Same thing as any intimate scene. There should always be a third party present, so bringing it into the space of the professional. And it should always be in front of the director or the intimacy coordinator, one of the two. When rehearsing a screen kiss, you always start off with a placeholder. So you do as little actual kissing as possible in the scene. When you're rehearsing, you do a little peck on the cheek as a placeholder for where the kiss will be, so that you don't have to, so the actors don't have to keep kissing each other over and over and over again. And then you need to talk through, as I've just explained, the quality of the kiss, like what is actually going on in the scene, what is actually the kiss about, who is doing the kissing, is it a like vacuum cleaner slurping kiss, or is it a light little just brush across each other's lips? What does the story need in that moment? And then you choreograph the kiss accordingly. This is a really important rule, but you know, if somebody has a communicable disease or has a cold sore, then you can't kiss. And then it's up to an intimacy coordinator or the director, if there isn't an intimacy coordinator, to come up with an alternative. But you know, even if the actors have, again, given their consent, they're happy with kissing, they're happy to do kissing in whatever scene, if on the day their cold sore is active, you can't have kissing. You can't be, you know, transferring diseases from one person to another. The other thing that's really important with kissing is that all the performers do appropriate oral hygiene. And that's really important. And you think it's, and you don't have to say that's obvious, but you do actually have to say it. And it's literally, it's just like intimacy coordination is about respect for the performers. This is about respect by the performers for each other. You know, if you're having to work in very close proximity to somebody, it's important that they are, you know, practicing good oral and body hygiene, which one would think would go without saying, but it doesn't always go without saying. Gosh, okay, my throat is getting dry with all this talking. Okay, so in terms of nudity, even if a performer has signed a nudity rider, as I've said before, they can withdraw their consent at any time before filming a scene. What the producers do have in a case like this as a protection, you know, if somebody said, okay, well, I'll do nudity, and then on the day they're like, no, I actually won't, is the producer has the right to use the body double if the performer has agreed to nudity and then on the day they withdraw their consent. And the performer doesn't have a say in what that body double looks like. So that is something that is a bit of a protection for producers. But in terms of nudity, again, just quickly going through some rules, there has to be pre-agreed times when nudity is going to be used. You know, I mean, very often with performers, you know, there's going to be a nude scene, they don't eat for the day before. So it's a really good idea to schedule nude scenes in the morning so that the actor doesn't have to go through the whole day of not eating and worrying, oh gosh, I'm going to have a little bit of a belly for the scene. And yeah, I mean, people just look better. It's always a good idea to agree when the nudity will be used and to make sure that you're scheduling the nudity as early in the day as possible. Obviously, it's absolutely imperative to use a closed set when there's any nudity whatsoever. As I mentioned before, there's no nudity with genitals touching. So when you have two performers actually physically touching each other, there always needs to be genital barriers or covers that the performers wear. They cannot ever be absolutely, the only time a performer can ever be absolutely naked is when they're not touching another performer. Otherwise, there must always be, you know, cushions or cock socks, which are coverings over penises or whatever genitalia covering the wardrobe is coming up with between the two performers. Yeah, performers can't override nudity agreements by themselves because there needs to be consent between two. So it's all very well if a woman, if a female actress says, okay, well, I don't want to show the front of my breasts, but I'm happy to show the side of my breasts. And then on the day she's like, oh, well, no, guess what? I changed my mind. I'm very happy to show any part of my breast. That's not okay because it's a consent and an agreement between two people. So she might be very happy to show her whole breasts and give consent to that. But maybe the other performer she's performing with doesn't want flapping breasts in his face while he's trying to act. So yeah, I mean, you cannot change an agreement on the day by yourself without the consent of everybody involved in the scene. Okay, so stand-ins should never be asked to replicate any sexual action whatsoever. If you're using a stand-in to block or light a scene, that stand-in literally doesn't replicate sexual actions. They just stand and be in the right place. There's no photography of any nudity, still photography of any nudity again without consent. This is extremely important, and that needs to be an additional consent. So if someone is doing a nude scene, for example, they need to, the production can't just bring a photographer or a camera person onto set on that day without specific consent, because when an actor is giving consent for nudity, it's consent for the shots of nudity that are shot and used in the film. It's not the moments before and it's not the moments after. And that's something that's really, really, really important to keep in mind, which is why when a nude scene is being performed, there's only nudity from when action is called till cut is called. And you always have to have a standby wardrobe person nearby on the set to cover up the actor as soon as cut is called, and then to take off the robes as soon as action is called, because there's only ever nudity from action to cut. And it's really important that that's adhered to. Again, one of the things that happened to me is I was working on a production, and an actress was so comfortable with her own body and so comfortable being nude that she was like, you know, I kept having to cover her up, and she kept throwing off the robe and walking around the set absolutely naked, which she was perfectly comfortable with, but other people in the crew weren't comfortable with. So it's always about respecting each other. You know, it's not just whether the actor's comfortable with their nudity, it's whether everybody else is comfortable with their nudity. And this is something that's very, very important to intimacy coordination. And that's where the part coordination is really important, because the intimacy coordinator coordinates between the whole crew and the performers and director who are performing the scene, to make sure that the performers and director are safe, but also to make sure that the rest of the crew are bringing what they need to make sure that that happens, and also that they are not triggered and traumatized by any kind of intimacy. I'm going to quickly zip through the rest, because I would like to have some time for questions rather than just talking. I think closed set protocols, I hope everybody is absolutely familiar with, but closed set protocols must be adhered to for all intimate scenes, and absolutely certainly for all nude scenes and semi-nude scenes. Okay, so closed set protocols have to be distributed in advance. If it's a simulated sex, only the actors and the directors block the scene. The DOP and the first AD are sometimes around just to see what the action's going to be and to make sure that it works for camera, and everyone else has got to be off the set for blocking. Obviously, closed set days are quiet days. They're not, I mean, I think anyone who's ever been on a set when there's an intimacy day will attest to the fact that suddenly people that you didn't even know on the crew are suddenly right there doing their jobs right on the set. Doesn't work like that. Closed set days are all those people who've been not anywhere near the set for the rest of the production stay not anywhere near the set for the intimate scenes. It's about respect. You know, it's about recognizing that what the actors are doing is doing their job and doing something that is not easy, doing something that is difficult and a difficult part of their job. So it's trying to give them the best environment to be able to do this in, for the sake of the production. You know, it's not for their sake. It's not, oh, she's a diva, she wants 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's for the sake of the production. It's to make the best movie or make the best series. That's why we all do this thing, and that's why we respect what the actors and the performers are doing for the production during intimate days. Yeah, it's really important that everyone looks at closed set protocols and knows what their specific responsibility is around protocols. You know, whether it's the gaffer knowing that there needs to be flags on the monitor, or the AD knowing that they need to check how many monitors there are on set. I mean, I heard a story about an actress who, you know, it was so difficult for her. She was playing the role of a prostitute, and you know, it was just everything against her religion, but it was a big production, and it was a foreign production, and so she really wanted to do it, and she did it, and you know, she didn't sleep the night. I mean, it was so traumatic for her, but she was like, okay, I realize I'll have to play these roles. And she played the role, and she thought, oh God, it's okay, it's a closed set, everything will be fine. And then in the middle of the scene, she needed to go to the bathroom, and she walked off the set. And as she walked to the bathroom, she saw, like, they were shooting in a place with a whole lot of flats, and there was an open monitor, and every Tom, Dick, and Harry from every flat was sitting there watching the monitor. You know, that makes it impossible for her to go back and carry on performing. So closed set protocols are incredibly important. Yeah, intimacy coordination is a holistic journey. Every member of the crew is involved in this journey in a real way, whether it's the AD making sure that everybody on the set is respectful, the director, the wardrobe. I mean, in actual fact, intimacy starts from writing. So when a person writes an intimate scene, you know, the old way was, and then they have sex. But nowadays we go, well, what does that mean? You, the writer, are telling us about the character's journey. Describe what is actually happening. You don't in a musical say, and then they start singing, never mind about what they're singing. In the same way, you don't say, and then they have sex, or what is the other one? And then they get it on. You know, that doesn't mean anything. Writers have to start writing what is the action. And this helps the production enormously, because It helps the performers know what is expected from them. So, is this mean that I'm going to just come together with another actor and we're going to drop off the screen? Or does it mean I'm expected to have no clothes on? So the scenes need to be described in the writing stage so that the producers can then negotiate with the actors in terms of what's required. It's back to that issue of open communication between everybody. But it's also the production can work out, okay, this is going to be a long, difficult scene that I need to budget and schedule for appropriately. You don't write, and then there's a big bar brawl, because how will a producer know how to budget and schedule that? And it's the same way with writing. I mean, obviously producers are involved in this process from day one in terms of getting consent, in terms of open communication, in terms of making sure that the set is mature and adult around these scenes. DOP, yes. Sound, I mean, sound, it's if the scene is a nude scene, then obviously you need a boom swinger. But it's about the boom swinger, either if the performers are uncomfortable with a male boom swinger on the day of intimacy, make sure that you get a female boom swinger, or make sure that you get a respectful boom swinger. I mean, I've worked with boom swingers who are just amazing. And they realize they have to hold the boom and they have to be in the room, but you try and have as few people as possible in the room. And the amazing boom swingers that I've worked with, what they do is they literally, they hold the boom and then they avert their eyes. And it's just helping make the environment easier and better for everyone who's involved in these intimate scenes.
I found this on the web.
Oh gosh, sorry. Siri just keeps talking. So wardrobe, yeah, I mean, wardrobe is a key part of intimacy coordination, and it's about, it's as I said before, intimate scenes are simulated scenes. So how do you make the person look as though they're naked even when they're not? How do you give the impression? What coverings can you use? What coverings can be covered by the body? What coverings can be covered by the choreography? Obviously, you do as much covering as possible to make the performers as comfortable as possible. The same with makeup. Yeah, it's, where do people have tattoos? That on the right is a merkin, which is, a genitalia cover for women when there's full nudity. Oh, post-production, absolutely. I mean, post-production is also involved in intimacy because, it's like, and especially when it's sexual violence, when it's things like rape, are incredibly triggering. And you need to inform the editors, this is what's coming. You can't just throw a rape scene in an editor and expect them to cut it without knowing what's coming. Also, the editors need to implement the agreements and the consent agreements that have been made with the performers. If the performer has said, I agree that every little bit of footage that's taken of me without clothes on will be thrown away, other than the bit that's going to be used in the film. That needs to be implemented by the editor. The editor needs to make sure that that's actually what's happening to that footage of the performer. And very often consent and riders are literally in that level of detail. That the actors consent to the footage existing, but no actor who's agreeing to do a nude scene is agreeing to have, footage of them naked strewn all over the internet. That's not what the agreement is. The agreement is that footage in that film that is going to be used, that is the footage, and it can be shown in a film, in a cinema, if they want that level of agreement. Can't be shown in a trailer that's going to suddenly appear at home, and their husband is going to have to suddenly watch an intimate scene of them or their children, just out of the blue, without them knowing that this is where the intimacy and the intimate scene will appear. I really am getting to the end. There are a lot of benefits of working within these protocols that I've been describing and working with intimacy coordinators. First of all, as I said right in the beginning of the talk, it really assists the director. I can't tell you how much money and time it saves, because if you land up without an intimacy coordinator on set, and the actor decides today is the day I'm not going to do what I've agreed, the negotiations that happen because there hasn't been full disclosure, because there haven't been openness, And the damage that you can potentially cause to that actor who will sue you is enormous. So it really does save time and money. And it helps create a better scene. If, as a director, if someone came to me and said, do you want to do the stunts in your movie by yourself, or do you want a stunt coordinator? I want a stunt coordinator. I want someone who's trained and specialized in helping make the stunts look as good as possible. And that's what an intimacy coordinator does. Obviously, it helps make the atmosphere on set better. I think I've talked through that enormously. And it protects the actors and the director and the producers. So, yep. The last little bit is that actors should never, ever, ever take, whatever trauma, whatever experience the character's gone through in order to make the scene home with them. And one of the jobs of the intimacy coordinator is to de-role. So to help the actor leave the character on set, so when they go home, they can get back into their own selves and go back into a safe, protected world. And then the very last thing is that a lot of the protocols that I've spoken about are available online. So at our website, which is safesetsintimacycoordinators.com, and the protocols are available here. So yes, sure, that was a huge amount of talking. So I don't know if anybody's got questions or how we would like to go forward. Jockey? Okay, so maybe I must just see if there are questions.
I see, yes, there's actually two questions. One is from Dorothy. The question is, what about scenes showing violence against children, including sexual?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dorothy. Those are the hardest scenes to work on, because actually you cannot, legally have a child on set where there's violence or sexuality in a scene. So what you're really supposed to do in those scenes, which I know most people don't do, but you're supposed to break the scene apart so that the child actor never sees the violence that the character is going to see in the film. So you shoot the child actor separate, and then you shoot what the child actor is seeing separate. But actually, legally, you're not allowed to have child actors actually visually seeing sexuality or sex or violence. And it's really important to protect children, because adults can understand this is a movie and this is acting, whereas children can't. And so the trauma that gets caused to children is very real. They think it's the real experience, and it's as damaging as if they are watching a rape, or as damaging as if they are being involved in whatever sexual violence. So working with children around sexual content and working with children around violent sexual content and violence is its own topic and field, and needs to be treated even more carefully than intimacy with adults. It's another next level. So, obviously, there are children that experience rape and people write about it. And there are children that experience, witness violence and witness sexual violence. That's the nature of the world. And art represents very often what's happening in the world. So it's not that it can't be done. It's just how to do it in a way that doesn't actually really traumatize a child and damage them for the rest of their life. And most especially non-acting children. So children that are not actually actors and actually don't have experience of acting.
Sarah in Label, I see another aspect to that same question from Dorothy. I'm wondering whether she also meant that the sexual violence is on the child. What happens? And I want to combine that With another one, I'm saying from Anonymous, how do you direct an intimacy scene among young teenage actors? So that first question, Sarah Label, I'm seeing two angles. The child is witnessing it. And what about if the child is a victim? What do you do?
You know, it's literally, it's how you choreograph the scene if the child is a victim. So you, for example, you design the scene so that you're just shooting the child's face. So you're shooting the reaction. And then you fully clothed, for example, have the child and the other actor being masked, so that there is no nudity, and the child thinks that it's a game, and the child thinks that the actor is playing with them, or whatever it is that you're wanting from the child. But you break up the scene into specific shots. So it's the reaction on the child's face that's selling the story, or it's a long shot where you can't see what's really going on. And then you cut to the child's, acting scared and terrified. And it's how you construct and make up those scenes. But they need to be carefully broken down into piece by piece by piece and put together in editing. They're not scenes that can just be improvised and shot.
Okay, thank you. Back to you, Label.
Actually, you can go ahead and Njoki.
Okay, all right. Somebody else says, thanks for the presentation, Sarah. Question, if the scene requires the character to be touched on the breasts and the actor is not comfortable with it, is the only option to find someone who can do it? Or there can be some, would that be convincing if somebody else comes on to do it? Yeah.
If I mean, every situation has to be dealt with by itself. So if, for example, the actor needs to be touched on the breast and you don't need to see it, so that you can just see the hand, like if you imagine in my screen, if you just see the hand coming like this, and then the actor goes like this, well, it looks like the actor got touched on the breast, right? But the actor was touched out of the screen, so you don't really know. So the actor doesn't need to be touched on the breast. If the director is saying, I actually need a hand on a breast, then you can use a body double and just do a close-up shot of the actor's hand on somebody else's breast, or you got to find another actor. So it's weighing those things up. Do you want the actor enough as a production and as a director that you can find an alternative that convinces the audience that that thing has happened that they haven't seen? Or and it goes down to that question of what purpose is this serving in the story? If it's, a titillating shot of a breast and you want the titillating shot of the breast, then you get the titillating shot of the breast and you may have to get a body double. But if it's because the actor is somebody that's, maybe the character is somebody that is, very offish and doesn't want to be touched, and particularly doesn't want to be touched on their breast, well, then you can choreograph that in a way where the action is on the actor's face. And you think you've seen, if you imagine all oral sex that you've ever seen in any movie ever, well, it's not really happening, So what's actually happening is the shots are choreographed and bits of each actor is masking each other, and they're acting with their backs or they're acting with their faces. And that's what's selling it to you. It's the same thing as a punch, right? Like nobody's actually getting punched, but in the reaction of the person with the hand masked away from camera, you convince that person has been punched, even if they haven't. And that's what intimacy is. You need to convince the audience that they've seen something that they haven't actually seen.
Yeah. There's one last question, Sarah. Would it be appropriate to ask performers for medical clearance for such things as hepatitis B for kissing scenes?
These questions have become extremely prevalent, especially in this time of COVID, because it's like suddenly kissing isn't just kissing. Kissing is like, it can be a death sentence to your mother who you're living with at home, who's 85 years old. And, you know, if an actor has got COVID and giving you COVID, and then you're going home and giving it to your grandmother or your mother, it's a death sentence. So the line absolutely is, nobody is expected, and it, you know, it's the line across the board, across all professions. Nobody is expected to do something in the line of their duty or job that threatens their life. So if anything is life-threatening, absolutely, the performer has the right to protect themselves. And that's why things like, you know, open herpes sores, you can't kiss another actor with a sore, because, I mean, maybe that's not life-threatening, but you are passing on a disease knowingly. Like, we can see the act of herpes, and you knowingly are risking passing it on. Same thing is, you know, if you've got COVID. So yes, absolutely. There, you know, there doesn't, people's privacy are protected. So the production has the right to request whatever information they need, but they need to keep that very protected and private. You know, it's disclosure issues.
I don't know how we're doing on timing, but I'd like to call upon my director, Cheryl, who is the director for MTF. She's our supervisor for our academies in West Africa, East Africa, and Southern Africa. Over to you, Cheryl.
Thank you, and fantastic. Thank you so much, Sarah, for a hugely insightful, informative, and motivating session. Thanks.
No, I mean, thanks for engaging in this. I do think it's an incredibly important issue to talk about, because I think that, you know, whether we like it or not, or whatever countries we come from, I think that creatives in all countries are starting to push boundaries, and they're wanting to tell stories that reflect the realities that they're experiencing. And as they do that, and as, you know, countries open up a little bit slowly, some countries, and a little bit faster others, there need to be mechanisms in place that protect performers. And one of the things that my company SafeSet's doing is, you know, providing training for intimacy coordinators in across the whole region. In fact, the whole EMEA region we've been asked to do some training. But it's so important that people that do this intimacy coordination are properly trained, because it's like stunt coordination. If you work with people that aren't trained, you're actually putting the performers in more danger. And it is, you know, it's not about putting restrictions and saying what should be and what shouldn't be on movies and productions. I mean, you know, I absolutely am not someone that says, oh, we need more sex in every production. I don't think we need more sex in every production. I absolutely don't. I think we need sex where sex tells a story, and where it's used to enhance the storytelling. Then we have sex in productions, and we should have it in a way that's safe and that protects the audiences and the performers and the cast and crew and the whole production. So I think it's really important, and I am so grateful to you for giving me the platform to be able to talk about this.
Thank you, Sarah. I hear we have about 4 minutes, but there's one last question. It's just a quick, straightforward answer from one of our leading directors in Nairobi, Kenya. Fakir is asking, please share the link in the last slide you had. I don't know what that link is. So maybe, Fakir, I can follow up that with Sarah, and I'll see what it was. And Cheryl, I hope you're still there. Do you want to use the last 2 minutes to give a wrap-up comment? Yeah. Cheryl, do you want to give a last thank you to everybody?
Thank you, Njoki. Yes, so I think we do have to wrap up. There are people already waiting for the next session. Thank you so much, Sarah. And we'll definitely provide more information, both via the Pavillon Afriques newsletter and the MTF portal, multichoicetalentfactory.com. Thank you very much, everyone.